Women, bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
We have lots to talk to you about today. We have, we both had really big weekends out there working, trying to drum up excitement for this election. As we record today, actually, Katie, today is National Voter Registration Day. So if you are not registered to vote, I know you are. If you're listening to Happy Women, you're registered to vote. But, you know, it's always a good reminder, whether it's an official national holiday or not, to get out there and remind everybody around you to make sure that they're registered to vote. We are also going to talk about some of the news happening today. And of course, it's unbelievable that in 65 days, 2 assassination attempts on President Trump's life and one, at least, plot to take him out that happened just days before the arrest made in Butler, Pennsylvania. So we thought we'd go through all of that, but let's start maybe with the most recent. And again, a lot of scrutiny on the Secret Service. Katie, President Trump was on his golf course on Sunday. This is not a surprise. If he's in South Florida, he's either going to be in Mar-a-Lago or he's going to be at his golf course. He's not out and about. These are the 2 places that he goes. And he was out golfing, and apparently Secret Service were ahead of him by like a hole, basically leapfrogging to try to make sure that everything was clear for him as he made his way along the course. And they saw a rifle, an AK-47 style rifle, sticking through the bushes. They shot into the bushes. The person we now know as Ryan Routh, he took off in a car. Thank God a good Samaritan, a woman saw him running, took a picture of his license plate, and they were able to track him down very swiftly in about 20 minutes or so. They were able to apprehend him. And what I thought was, there's so many different pieces to this story. But the sheriff described the arrest when they apprehended him. He said he was very calm, like he had just come back from lunch or that he had just come back from a church luncheon, basically, I think is what the sheriff said. So even though you have SWAT team, you have the Secret Service that just fired on you, you would think a normal person would have adrenaline pumping through their body. The sheriff described him as being so calm. There are all sorts of reports about his history. We know that he wanted to fight in Ukraine. He actually went to Ukraine. We know that he had several run-ins with the law, that there was a lot of theft. He had weapon possession charges. We'll take this story piece by piece, but what were your thoughts when you heard this story break on Sunday?
Well, first of all, it's heartbreaking. I find it really scary because with Butler, Pennsylvania, you can sort of say, well, it's a one-off and it's a crazy person. And to be fair, this is also a crazy person, but still, I just think it's alarming, right? It's really shocking. And I think it makes me sort of exponentially more concerned for the president's safety. And also, quite frankly, I'm so disappointed in the Secret Service. I mean, there's so much going on. You know, I was really interested to see Senator Josh Hawley's report come out a few days ago. And it's a great report. It's available online for anybody who wants to read it. I think it's a great read. And he identifies, some things that we already knew, some things that we didn't know, but to have it kind of all in one place, the many problems, it helps you understand better how this second incident could happen. So I was particularly struck. Josh Hawley's report highlights the fact that Secret Service officers declined offer. Now, this is with regard to Butler, Pennsylvania, that particular shooting. So Secret Service had declined offers from local law enforcement to deploy drones, that Secret Service agents in charge were told, don't even bother asking for more help. The request will be denied. Yeah. That the local law enforcement had abandoned the rooftop due to heat. That the agent in charge himself or herself had shown signs of incompetence, not doing well on a test. I also thought it was really interesting that they had to fill in. They didn't have enough Secret Service agents, and that they had to fill in with some DHS staff, and that they had only received 2 hours of training for this. So then it shouldn't come as a surprise that we get this second incident in Florida. And I think what's been surprising for so many people is the fact that Routh had apparently been hanging out in the bushes for 12 hours. So clearly that says to me, nobody swept the area before Trump embarked on play. All they did was have somebody out just ahead of him.
And I think one of the things that they said was he's not, and this was not an explanation at all, that he's not the sitting president, so they wouldn't have shut it down. But here's what could have happened. I mean, I would think at the very least, you have someone at least walking the perimeter, walking the sidewalk. Apparently, the reason that Ryan Routh chose that spot is because that's a very easy spot where you get direct access to whoever happens to be at that particular hole, and that the mainstream news media uses that as a spot to try to get pictures. So if that is a weak spot, and you know this because he golfs there every day of the week that he's in South Florida, you would think that there would be an effort to at least take a little walk around. I mean, you could stick Barney Fife out there and have more protection, I think, than he had with the Secret Service. To your point, I also am very concerned about the type of investigation that will be led in South Florida, because you will know that this FBI, that this part of the Southern District of Florida, these are the same people who investigated President Trump and who searched his home for classified documents out of Mar-a-Lago. When the Secret Service director, who's now acting, Ronald Rowe, who took over because of the failures in Butler, Pennsylvania, he's now the acting director. I loved the optics that he went to Florida immediately and that he was there and that he had a meeting with President Trump. I think all of that was fine. But when he gave his press conference, Katie, the one thing that stuck in my craw, I don't know where my craw is, but it stuck there, is that he was really kind of giving a glowing endorsement to Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, anybody who cares about the safety of President Trump and cares about his well-being and about his future may not necessarily care so much about the leadership of Alejandro Mayorkas. And so it does make me wonder what kind of investigation will happen, just because of the very disappointing investigation into Butler. Without the whistleblowers, we would not know much. The Secret Service has not wanted to get in front of this. And you're even hearing from Senator Blumenthal, who is a Democrat out of Connecticut, saying that what he learned about the Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt and the Secret Service failures would astonish the American people. So if he is saying that there is a problem, and by the way, he's been going to the Biden and Harris administration today saying that there needs to be more Secret Service protection. When you have Dick Blumenthal concerned about it, you know that there are some problems here. And so I was really happy. I've been a harsh critic as of late of Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Very disappointing with his presidential run. But one thing I was happy to hear is that he said that the state of Florida would do their own independent investigation alongside the feds. Because at this point, and I am very sad to say it, I do not say it lightly, I do not trust what is going to come from the FBI's investigation nor the Secret Service's report. So they are very into covering themselves and not really covering the well-being of their targets. And I am happy to hear that DeSantis is looking at doing his own look at what went on, because I think it's really important. And this is not political. It could be Trump, it could be Biden, it could be Obama, it could be Bush, it could be anybody. We need to make sure that our Secret Service is up to speed and providing the most top-notch protection for our elected officials.
Well, and there's this also really shocking story back from November 2023 about the head of the Bureau's FBI's Miami field office is led by Jeffrey Veltri, who was promoted, but apparently a whistleblower had come forward and said he was adamantly and vocally anti-Trump.
Yeah.
And he would not be promoted until he scrubbed his social media.
That's the problem.
It's incredible. Yep.
That is the problem. When you have these people as the investigators, it makes you really wonder. I also am very curious, and I think we are owed an explanation as well, whether or not there was any connection between Crooks, who was the shooter in Pennsylvania, and this individual, Routh, who was the shooter or the attempted shooter in Florida. Look, and maybe nothing. These may be individual actors who are motivated by all of the heated rhetoric and all the hate driven towards President Trump. But if there is a connection, we should know about it. Are there more? I mean, you just mentioned, we had the story of this Pakistani national. His last name is Merchant. He is in jail and was in court on Monday, the same day as Ryan Routh, the shooter in Florida, because of his plot to assassinate President Trump. He was trying to hire U.S. Marshals who were undercover for $5,000 to take out Trump in late August or early September. That was being funded by Iran. one of the things that I think is really important that we do in any scenario like this is follow the money, because these types of plots usually cannot be hatched very quickly if you don't have a lot of money. And so one of the things I saw pointed out is that this guy has a small roofing business. His income is about $3,000 a month. So you have to ask yourself, how did he fly from Hawaii back to North Carolina to Florida? He was flying to Europe to try to get to Ukraine. This guy has been flying all over the place, and that's not cheap. He's also amassing a collection of weapons that he used to try to take out President Trump. I am not for conspiracy theorists, but I think that to avoid them, we need to answer these questions quickly about where his money was coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'd love to shift a little bit as well to talk about how the left has reacted to the shooting. I mean,
that was next for me too. I'm in shock about this.
So one of the ones that really stuck out for me here, because this is a local Virginia story, is Rachel Vindman. She's the wife of whistleblower, quote, whistleblower Alexander Vindman. And her brother-in-law is running for Congress as a Democrat here in Virginia's 7th district. And she came out with this outrageous tweet saying, nobody's ear was hurt. Get on with it, people. Wow. Now she has since had to remove it. But, you know, I was reading, for example, the Los Angeles Times yesterday and what they wrote about it. And I was listening to some of the Sunday talk shows and how they responded to it. And it was amazing how all of them came out and said, this is Trump's rhetoric that is causing this kind of thing. And it blows my mind. That's all I can say.
Said that if Trump would stop being a threat to democracy, Democrats would be able to stop calling him out. And you've had all of think about it, Rachel Maddow, you had Joy Reid, you had all of the MSNBC crew taking him to task for his rhetoric. You had Hillary Clinton, even after the second attempt on his life, come out and say that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy and he must be stopped. I think it was Newsweek, and I can't remember exactly if I'm getting that wrong, but there was a headline saying that he was asking for this. Essentially, he's asking to be shot. Then I've seen, of course, the people also online who are suggesting that somehow this was someone that was paid by Trump to gain sympathy for him once again. So it's wild. I mean, it's like the Wild West of rumors. They're saying he either paid for someone to shoot at him, he's asking for someone to shoot at him, he's a threat to democracy, doubling down. It has to stop. This whole idea that somehow President Trump is going to go into office and never leave or destroy our democracy. If anything, the people behind the destruction of our democracy are the people that paint themselves as the good stewards of it. It's the Democrat Party who now have a nominee that no one's ever voted for before. It is frustrating. It is sad. It's despicable. But your husband, Dr. G, Seb Gorka, was on my morning show today, and he said something that's so true. With every single one of these headlines, they are trying to normalize the murder of Donald Trump. And that's what they're trying to do, that somehow he asked for it. It's disgusting.
Couldn't agree more. Volatility and uncertainty are everywhere we turn. Many Americans have grown increasingly tired of the reckless fiscal spending, mounting national debt, and the looming threat to the dollar. With never-ending political and global conflicts, Americans are looking for a way out of the fragile paper system and craving a trustworthy asset to help protect their savings. That's why they turn to gold. Specifically, a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. If you have over $100,000 in a retirement account, it's time you learned about the potential benefits of a gold IRA from Augusta Precious Metals. Augusta Precious Metals is a world-class organization that prides itself on top-notch service. Ready to learn more? Get your free guide on gold IRAs today by calling 855-222-6994. Volatility is everywhere. Now is the time to take control of your retirement to secure a brighter financial future with Augusta Precious Metals. Call them at 855-222-6994 today. All right, come on. Let's shift to a happy topic.
We be happy women now.
This is overwhelming. We are the happy. We have to stay the happy women.
I told you sometimes we're the mostly happy women with the news and the headlines. All right, so switching gears, let's talk a little bit about what we both did this past weekend. Part of my job at Salem Radio is to host the Morning Answer in Los Angeles on AM 870 and AM 590. I also host the Inland Empire Answer on AM 590, and you join me there every week. And one of the most amazing things that we get to do is we get to put on some really incredible events. And we have a Super Bowl event of the year. It's called Town Hall. And we have a lot of people come out for this. It was at Universal Studios. If any of you have been out to Hollywood, Universal Studios at the Hilton Hotel. And we had an incredible lineup. We had our pre-show stage with Sonia Shaw, who's been on this podcast before. She's a warrior mom who is the head of the Chino Valley Unified School District. We had Alex Balekian, who is an ICU doctor, but he is running for Congress for Adam Schiff's empty seat, actually in the district that I run in. Incredible. Tells our story, Katie. He was a doctor, had a great life, but he saw what was going on to his community. And he said, no, I'm running. And he made it as a Republican to our top 2 primary system. And he looks very well poised. He's getting a lot of attention against the Democrat in this race. So I have a lot of hope for him. He's incredible. And there's a strong Armenian presence in Glendale. So Alex Balekian is Armenian. He really speaks to that community. So that's exciting. We had Jennifer Van Laar from Red State, also who's been with us on this podcast. Great. And we had Jonathan Hatami, who is my friend from the DA's office. He is a deputy DA who has been in charge of some of the most high profile cases against kids. Gabriel Fernandez, Anthony Avalos. These are stories that have Netflix documentaries after them, very well known across the country. And he's been the top opponent to George Gascon in the DA's office. So it was great to have him there. We had Congressman Mike Garcia, who is a Republican who wins in a Democrat plus 12 district in LA County, our only Republican congressional representative in LA County. So it was great to have him there. We had an update on the electoral map from Charlie Kirk. And then our panel discussion was Dennis Prager, Larry Elder, Steve Hilton, who is of Fox News and also maybe fueling rumors he may run for governor in California. And then a friend of yours who is now my new friend, and I love him so much, former congressman from Texas, Louis Gohmert, also came out. So it was so incredible. And we were able to talk about national issues, politics, 2024, California. These are the kind of events that sort of heal your soul and get you ready for the next couple of months leading up to the November election.
Well, I love it. You had there some of the great fighters, and it makes you just so appreciate who we have on our side. You know, we so often lament the fact that the left seems to dominate what we call mainstream media, certainly Hollywood, so much of the culture, so many of our institutions. But boy, do we have some great people on our side. And I'm so excited. I mean, you think about all that Dennis Prager has done, and with PragerU, you think about the incredible things that Charlie Kirk has done, where he has almost single-handedly turned around so many college students. And having said that, I also have to acknowledge, ISI, Young America's Foundation, Claire Booth Liu Center for Conservative Women. There are a group of great conservative organizations that try to support college students. But, Charlie Kirk with Turning Point I feel like he made it cool to be a conservative in college.
And I got to tell you, I was actually, if you're watching the video feed, you may have seen me scrolling because I wanted to get this note from him, because after we did our interview, he actually sent me an update on a really great ruling in Pennsylvania. But with the RNC the way that it was, and believe me, the RNC is better today than it was a year ago at this time. Michael Whatley is there. Lara Trump is there. We have more money going directly to the candidates that need it. We have more support. We realize we have to play by the rules that the Democrats are setting. We just have to be more aggressive. And before that switch in the RNC, really people like Charlie Kirk and these outside organizations were really the ones working on momentum, voter turnout, kind of swamping the vote, and of course, some of them election integrity. When I talked to Charlie, he made it very clear, we're not an integrity organization. Yes, they are an organization with integrity, but they're not an election integrity organization. They're all about swamping the vote. And he talked about some of his successes. And when you hear about Turning Point Action, which is another app that can be downloaded, this is doing what Trump Force is doing, Trump Force 47, what Scott Pressler is doing. where they provide real-time information to people who want to make phone calls, who want to go knocking on doors. And Turning Point Action is actually doing so much that if you want to fly, because they really believe that Arizona is going to be key to all this, if you want to fly to Arizona or drive to Arizona, if you're in California, wherever you are, they'll put you up in a hotel for a week and have you chase ballots before the election day. And then on election day, turn out voters. So they're really putting their money where their mouth is, and they're creating these real momentum building avenues to get activists organized, because so many of us want to do something, but we're sort of floating out in the atmosphere, and he's bringing us together. And that's really important. You want me to share this update? Because we talked all about the swing states, and he believes that Trump has more paths to victory than Kamala Harris does. I'll just kind of rephrase some of the things he talked about. He really believes that everything stems around Pennsylvania. If President Trump wins Pennsylvania, you can open up a whole slew, like 3 or 4 different paths to victory that all stem on a victory in Pennsylvania. If he doesn't win in Pennsylvania, it is still possible for him to win. There just aren't as many options to do it when you're looking at that electoral map, which is what it's all about. So that's why when you hear so many people talking about Pennsylvania, that's hugely important. And he recognizes that. So this is what he sent to me after our interview. He said, it is the single most important election integrity win of the year so far. He said Pennsylvania's Supreme Court ruled on this, I think it was Friday, that mail-in ballots that are undated or misdated will not be counted in the 2024 election. That's huge. He said, this is a big win for Republicans. It's expected to impact thousands of votes in November. And also, he made a comment about the request for early ballots in Pennsylvania. And he said the number of requests for early ballots in Pennsylvania is down 90%, which is huge for Republicans who tend to vote on election day in person. So that was a big win in the courts in Pennsylvania. Those undated, misdated ballots will be tossed out, which is really helpful, especially since they count ballots far beyond election day.
Yeah, and for anybody who has any questions about the importance of this, I really recommend an episode from our friends over at Red Pilled America, another great podcast. They did a really interesting episode. I hadn't heard it when they first put it out in 2020, but they just reposted it, so it's at the top of their feed, about the election of 2018 in Orange County. So I really had not been that aware of this election, where you had 6 Republican candidates who won on election day, according to the vote counts. And then over the next 10 days, a growing number of absentee ballots were turned in, flipping every single seat into a Democrat win. And listening to this episode will, first of all, make your blood boil, but second of all, will help you to understand why election integrity is so important, but also why chasing down absentee ballots for our side is so important and has to be part of our strategy to win.
Especially because in California, there have been so many lawsuits that even when there have been some wins and we've cleaned up voter rolls, all the names get added back on because those lawsuits end up getting turned around. And our voter rolls are extremely bloated. I mean, I've had people tell me horror stories, listeners to my program, saying, there's a 1-bedroom apartment that I lived in and I got 18 different ballots. I'm not making this up. I mean, these are real stories. And so it's really critical if you move, and this I think would apply to anywhere in the country. If you move in Los Angeles, we've learned in California, you actually have to shut down your voter registration and re-register somewhere else. If you don't, you remain on the voter rolls indefinitely. I know I bought my grandparents' house, that when I moved into that house, my grandparents got ballots sent to my home for about 10 years after they died. So, and this was after we tried to get them off the voter rolls.
Wow.
Now, I was a good person and ripped them up and threw them away. But how many of those ballots go into the wrong hands? And also, just to what you learned about in the Red Pill podcast, 2018 in California was the first year that ballot harvesting was legal, meaning anybody could turn in any ballot. You don't have to be related to the person. It's just free, fair game. And Democrats used that against Republicans, which is why you saw those elections slip away and we were shellacked. And so in 2020, Republicans started playing by the rules and we started flipping some of those seats back. And I believe that in this election, we're going to flip another. Katie Porter, who ran for senator in California, is out because she ran for senator. And it looks like a Republican is primed to take that position back. So slowly but surely, we've gotten it back. But we have to play by the rules Democrats set, because they are setting those rules because they think they can win. Even if it doesn't feel right, we still need to be doing that. So it's just important to know what's going on in those rules so that we can capitalize on them too. All right. So you did something fun. That was my weekend, but you were at the Hispanic Festival. There was one in Virginia. Tell us about that.
It was really fun. It was the Que Pasa Festival in Herndon, Virginia, which is a beautiful little historic town here in Fairfax County. It was the first time they were holding this festival in Herndon, and it was so fun. I had no idea what it would be like. Well, we've been hearing more and more how more and more Hispanics are coming over to the Republican side, but many do vote Democratic. So I didn't know, would we get hate? Would we get whatever? I can't tell you the number of people who came up and talked to us. We had a Republican tent. People were super excited. Lots of thumbs up. All of our Trump signs, all of our Trump street signs, yard signs were scooped up. So there was a lot of interest. But here was one of the really interesting things about it for me. So I had a volunteer working with me. She is a Hispanic mom, homeschooling mom of 7 kids. And she was telling me about having gone into her local Herndon library and checked out a book that she thought was really cute. And she showed me pictures. And the book was it's got a red cover with 2 flamingos with their necks intertwined, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And it's called Do Animals Fall in Love?
Oh.
Sounds really sweet.
Yeah, very sweet.
You open it up. What's the first chapter? How do animals do it? Yes. And then and then you go further, and this is an illustrated book. It is absolutely 100% for kids. This is, I don't see a targeted age range, but it's illustrated. It's clearly targeted for kids. It actually shows you close-ups of animal genitalia, explains how animals have sex. Oh, no. It gets better. Wow. Shows you animals having sex, shows you animals intermingling having sex, shows animals carrying the pride flag, and shows shows animals having a threesome. So
unbelievable.
So I just want to say this makes me even more excited about our guest who's going to be on the next episode of our podcast, which will air in a couple of days. Linda White is a grandmother. I happened to meet her at a church event in Colorado a couple of years ago. And I had been talking about what can parents do, right? That was in the middle of COVID, sort of back in sort of closer to the start of the whole parent movement. And so I then turned it to the audience and I asked, what are you all doing? What are you thinking about doing? And she raised her hand, and it always stayed with me. She said she was really thinking about the role of grandparents, because grandparents have more time on their hands, right? And I have heard this so many times. We all know parents of young kids are swamped just trying to stay afloat. And she said she was really thinking about starting a group called Grandparents for Kids. And we have some mutual friends. And so she reconnected with me a couple of weeks ago, and she started the organization Grandparents for Kids. She's now got over, I think, 500 members. It's in 12 states and it's growing. But one of the things that the grandparents do is they keep an eye on the books in the libraries. And, on that note, I just have to say it was a bunch of grandparents that flagged the fact here in my little community that that our library was hosting a drag queen for toddlers story hour. And they're the ones that went out and protested it. So I just think there is a huge role for the older generation. And also because a lot of the older generation, I think, understand better the assault. Maybe they haven't even themselves been so indoctrinated by the media. They get what's wrong with a book like this, talking about how do animals doing it and showing animal threesomes. So I'm grateful for this mom that she noticed this. We've got 10 copies of this book in the Fairfax County Public Library system. I'm going to flag it for everybody I know. I'm going to send it out so people pay attention to this, but we have to do this. We have to look at the books in our libraries, in our schools. It is nasty, the stuff that's out there.
And all to groom kids. That's what's just so disgusting about it. Ugh. All right. Hey, I did have, speaking of animals, I did have a protester at our town hall event. Only one.
What did they do?
In the pre-show room, I saw a sign that said Trump sucks, S-U-X. And I thought, all right, you know what? I got to ask this person to come up on stage, much to the chagrin, by the way, of our security team, who did not like that I did that.
Wow.
She came up on stage, glitter all over her face. She's trying to set up her tripod and her camera. I said, oh, you're not going to be here long. But I said, you brought a Trump sucks sign to the convention, so clearly you want some attention. So why are you here? She rattles off her, liberal talking points, what she's starting for, and she hosts a podcast and blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. I said, well, I gave you your opportunity to tell people what you stand for. I said, now let me ask you this question. Have you been treated well today? She said, yeah, I've been treated fine. And I said, great. I said, now ask yourself this. If I wore a Trump hat to your convention, would I be treated in the same way? And she didn't answer. And I said, that's what I thought. Thanks so much. Enjoy your time here. Do you know she spent the rest of the time at our convention dressed in a dinosaur costume in front of the hotel? One of the blow-up T-Rex costumes from Amazon. So I'm telling you, this is what we're dealing with here. People who like to spread their message using all sorts of animal references, including wearing a dinosaur costume. It's what we're fighting for here. All right. Well, on that note, that's another episode of Happy Women. I want to tell you a couple of things. First of all, thank you so much for sharing the podcast and for your 5-star reviews. We really appreciate those. Continue to give us the 5-star reviews. It really helps so that people can discover our podcast and share with your friends. If you want to watch us or see us on different platforms, you can get them all at SalemPodcastNetwork.com. You can follow Katie Gorka, by the way, on her website, katiegorka.org. You can get her book. It's called Next Gen Marxism, which you should already add to your library. And of course, find her on Facebook. Just search for Catherine Gorka. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Jennifer Horn Radio, and on Truth and on X at Jennifer Horn. Thanks for joining us. This is another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.